Let's take a look at equations with rational exponents. An equation with a rational exponent contains a variable expression raised to an exponent that is a rational number. Notice that the variable is not part of the exponent. So in this case, we have the variable x, and the exponent is 3/5. The 3/5 is the rational number. Before we go ahead with example 9, something I want to refresh your memory on is if we had something like x cubed equals 8, we would solve that by raising both sides to the 1/3 power or by using the cube root. And on this side, also raising it to the 1/3 power, so we end up with x equals 2. However, if we had something like x squared equals 4, in the same manner, if we raise both sides to the 1/2 power, which is also the same as using the square root, then we're applying the square root, we're applying the 1/2 power, and we need to remember that there's actually a step in here that the square root of a squared is an absolute value. That's what gives us the plus or minus 2. Because up here we had two possible answers. One is a positive 2 and one is a negative 2. If you take negative 2 and square it, you get 4. And if you take positive 2 and square it, you get 4. So they are both solutions. Over here, because we have a cube and our 8 is positive, only positive 2 would make 2 cubed equal 8, and negative 2 would not. So kind of keep in mind as we're working through these examples that if we're going to be using a square root sign as part of our solution, then we're going to need to apply that plus and minus sign to make sure that we allow both possible solutions. Let's take a look at x to the 3/5 equals 8. I'm going to raise both sides using that power property, and I'm going to raise both sides. I'm going to use the 5/3 power, and the reason I'm using 5/3 power is because it's the reciprocal of 3/5, and that makes my new exponent 15/15, which is just a 1. And now I have 8 to the 5/3 power. I'm going to simplify this by doing the 1/3 exponent first, and then the exponent of 5. And 8 to the 1/3 power is 2. Raising that to the 5th power, we get 32. So back here we have x equals 32. Let's take a look at example 10. A few steps to get to that x variable, so let me add 11 to both sides of the equation, and we have 2x to the 5/4 power equals 64. Let me divide both sides by 2 to get that variable x alone to the 5/4 power equals 32. And now let's go ahead and raise both sides to that reciprocal 4/5 exponent. Notice that the 4/5 exponent really means 32 to the 1/5, which is the 5th root. And then later we'll use the 4th power. So 32 to the 1/5 power is a 2. And then raised to the 4th power is going to be a 16. So we end up with an answer of 16. Let's take a look at one more example, example 11. And here our expression is going to be x plus 200 raised to the exponent of 2/3. So notice that our x is inside parentheses, and we can't get to those parentheses until we eliminate that exponent of 2/3. So I'm going to start there. We have x plus 200 to the 2/3 power. I'm going to raise both sides to the 3/2 power. So on the left-hand side, we're getting x plus 200 to the 1st power, and I really don't need those parentheses. On the right-hand side, we've got 36 to the 3/2 power. Okay, so let's take a look. On the left, we have x plus 200. On the right-hand side, let's start to simplify. Notice that this is one of those cases where we applied the 1/2 power. It wasn't initially part of the equation. We put it there. So we're going to have to use the plus or minus of 36, to the 1/2 power. And then after we get that answer, we're going to cube both sides. So we've got our x plus 200 equals 36 to the 1/2 power is 6. So we've got positive or negative 6. And then we're going to cube both of those. So we've got x plus 200 equals positive 6 cubed and we've got x plus 200 equals negative 6 cubed. So x plus 200 equals 6 cubed is 216. And let me go ahead and solve, moving the 200 over. I get x equals 16. And over here, x plus 200 and negative 6 cubed is going to be negative 216. And then again, continue by solving. And we get x equals negative 416. And we can go back and check each one of those. Just looking at checking with the 16, I'll do it verbally. 16 plus 200 is 216. Using the 1/3 power as the cube root, that would give us 6, and 6 squared is 36. And then using negative 416, negative 416 plus 200 would give us negative 216. The cube root would give us negative 6, and then squaring a negative 6 is also positive 36. So both of those do work. And that ends example 11.